Are you prepared for the new normal of Chinese influence? Were you underperforming in China before the coronavirus? And are you constantly struggling to find the right people, partners, and strategy to realize your full potential in China? Most foreigners and foreign companies will struggle in China, even as they are generating revenue, just as most of your Chinese counterparts struggle outside of China. Chinese leaders doing business overseas often struggle to win over local hearts and minds because their commander mentality is the antithesis of being a servant leader. Now, I'm not saying that Chinese leaders are bad, but what I'm telling you is that they live and play by a completely different set of rules that you and I may not be familiar with. You see, Chinese values, Chinese rationale, Chinese expectations are literally and figuratively the opposite of how most Westerners think, especially when it comes to business, politics, and relationships. Now, not having a common set of values isn't necessarily a bad thing, as long as you're able to learn how to play by a new set of rules. You see, my wife is Chinese. Some of my best friends are from China, and I've had some of the most amazing Chinese employees, partners, customers, and clients. But I've also experienced some of the worst things imaginable from people that I love and trust, which is why you also have to adapt to China being a land of contradictions. So if you learn how to know the game, win the game, China can be a tremendous land of opportunities. My name is Gene, and I'm here to share with you my journey into China and why the first piece of advice that Dr. Stephen Strange received before he became Dr. Strange, master of the mystic arts, is also the best piece of advice that I can give you for winning in China. So if you saw Doctor Strange, the movie released by Marvel Studios in 2016, Mordo said something to Doctor Strange before he was first allowed into the sanctum to meet the Ancient One. Mordo said, "Might I give you some advice? Forget everything you think you know." Dr. Strange's reaction was, "Okay." You see, we're all skeptics when someone or something challenges our worldview or reality. But what Mordo was really saying is, the only way to discover a true path to success is to first erase all of your preconceived notions about how the world works. In other words, you can never know the things you don't know, which are your unknown unknowns, unless you are able to fundamentally adjust your own perceptions. This is what some people call adjusting your mindset, but what I'm going to show you is how to develop a mindset for China business. Now, China has the world's longest continuous history, almost 5,000 years, but it's only been since 1980 that Deng Xiaoping opened China to the rest of the world and became Time Magazine's Man of the Year. And actually, he had that honor twice, first in 1978 and then again in 1985. This is when China began its journey to become the world's second largest economy and soon to be the first. No one today questions China's influence, which continues to increase in both positive and negative ways for Western democracies. But for foreigners doing business in China, and especially for Westerners and Americans, most of us are unaware of our cultural biases and, of course, our unknown unknowns. But more importantly, we are unaware of the real implications and potential ramifications of our ignorance, and often our egos too, which is why there is a deep-seated misperception that most Chinese people are corrupt and unethical. Yes, I said misperception, but not in absolute terms, in relative terms, because there are controllable factors most foreigners fail to incorporate in their approach for doing business in China that directly or indirectly leads to the bad behavior that's the source of most of our frustrations, anxiety, and mistrust towards Chinese people. Now, let me share with you a little story to try to put all this into the proper cultural context. The year is 2004, and I'm the channel manager in Greater China for an American synthetic lubricants company. We're talking about very complex proprietary formulations designed into things like printers and mobile devices, but also used in satellites, avionics, and military applications. Yes, these are the ones with mil specs that would need special US government approval to sell to a communist country. For a bit of context, I was hired for this position because I speak English almost as well as I speak Chinese. I have an engineering degree from Georgia Tech, and I was previously a country manager in Taiwan. So who could be more qualified to lead the business development efforts in China? Yes, that's what I thought too. Well, we started off working with our distributors from Taiwan to handle sales in China. This made perfect sense because Taiwan is a democratic society that speaks Mandarin Chinese. We had offices in Shenzhen handling the South and Shanghai handling the West, but we needed to establish another office to handle Middle and Northern China. We hired Mao Xiaodong, not Mao Zedong, because he was a family connection with one of our Taiwanese distributors. Family in Chinese culture represents the closest Guanxi connection. So remember this word, Guanxi. Now, Mao was dirt poor. He was living in Shenzhen at the time, but he literally couldn't afford a train ticket to Shanghai. So we bought him a train ticket, and when he first arrived, he wasn't even wearing any shoes. Now, to make a long story short, we cleaned him up, we rented him an apartment and then an office, and we trained and mentored him to be the general manager of our Nanjing office. We literally and figuratively took him from rags to riches. He soon had a company car and led a team of about 10 employees. Now, what could possibly go wrong? And would it be possible that Mao would behave in a corrupt or unethical manner? Outwardly, Mao was very humble, gracious, and always thankful for all that we had given him, and rightfully so, as he continued to depend on our support. We constantly went on joint calls with him to get him up to speed with the technical side, and we even gave him inventory on consignment, so he didn't have to bear those costs while getting his business started. American key accounts manufacturing in China were simply referred to him to take the orders. Now, in those days, it was much easier for a local Chinese to register a business, and we thought having a family member we could trust was easily the best solution. In less than 2 years, Mao went from shoeless to driving a BMW, and his success was our success, a win-win, right? Would you believe that Mao secretly registered all of our trademarks in China? And he's the brother-in-law of one of our Taiwanese distributors. Fortunately, we had a Guanxi connection in Beijing, and we were able to contest this registration in time. Would you then believe that Mao created fake labels and fake products that he then sold for greater profit to our key accounts? He began producing his own lubricants without the proper formulations, and he then sold them with fake labels as an authorized distributor. Now imagine the nightmare warranty recalls for cars failing due to bad lubrication. And we're not talking about engine oil. We're talking about connector lubricants in electronics or high-end greases and oils to extend the life of power windows, door locks, seats, airbags, and steering mechanisms. Now you're probably thinking, this sounds like typical corrupt Chinese behavior, stealing IP and creating fakes. Isn't this currently the biggest challenge US tech companies face in China? Yes, but what if I told you Mao's bad behavior was our fault and that it could have easily been prevented? Would you believe in hindsight that we actually forced him to behave this way? In other words, this type of bad behavior is totally preventable, and let me tell you how. When your Chinese partner claims local competitors are winning on price, don't discount his warnings as a negotiation tactic or posturing. When he says local quality is as good or better, don't try to convince him otherwise. And when he informs you that you need to understand Chinese culture and how things work in China, don't dismiss and ignore this great piece of advice. This is the time to ask questions and to begin developing empathy and greater cultural awareness. You see, Chinese Guanxi connections or Guanxi relationships are based on a continuous exchange of goodwill and reciprocity. And when your Chinese counterparts don't receive the goodwill they expect based on their gestures, which include giving advice and suggestions, then what I call goodwill extraction is likely to occur. When Chinese people believe getting reciprocity from you is futile or impossible, then naturally they will extract goodwill from other parts of the value chain. You see, no one knows the Chinese value chain better than Chinese people. So this is where our ignorance, lack of cultural awareness, and egos eventually force our Chinese partners or employees into what we believe is bad behavior. To reciprocate bad advice that you don't agree with, you simply need to acknowledge it, respect it, and attempt to better understand it in the proper cultural context. And with this new attitude, you will be amazed where the conversations lead. Because remember, Chinese reasoning is circular, which means you always begin with maybe to eventually reach your desired outcome. Now, in our 4-part webinar series, Know the Game, Win the Game, Doing Business in China, we will show you how to communicate and negotiate effectively with Chinese people, even when they're being vague and non-committal. We're going to teach you how to develop real Guanxi relationships to prevent and even eliminate this so-called bad Chinese behavior. We're going to show you tactics and strategies that will immediately turn any negative or contentious conversation positive, which will make it possible and even probable to achieve your desired outcome. We will also have legal experts who fully understand the continuously evolving legal and regulatory environment in China to help you avoid landmines and to save time and money by having the right preparedness and legal strategy. The first of 4 webinars with live Q&A is on May the 14th, beginning at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So register now to submit your #1 burning question about doing business in China that we will address during the Q&A. By registering now, you will receive access to all 4 webinars, plus on-demand access to all the replays. You'll receive instant access to EME's China Business 101 self-study course, which has over 5.5 hours of on-demand video. You're going to receive EME's Tactical English Blueprint for Doing Business in China, where we say knowing how to speak Chinese doesn't mean you know what to say in Chinese, but knowing what to say is a win in any language. You'll also be invited to join our Know the Game, Win the Game Facebook community to share your stories, ask questions, and engage with other Chinese experts. Access to everything is just $297 per seat. And as a bonus for registering now, you will also receive a free coaching call with myself and one of our legal experts to gain instant clarity on your existing strategy and guidance on how you can adapt your approach to the new normal of doing business in China. Register now, and your journey towards success in China will begin immediately. Just on the other side of the registration page is a bonus lesson for winning in China. Because developing a mindset for China business begins, but it never ends. So it will continue well after the 4th webinar is over. Now I'm looking forward to seeing you on the inside, hearing about your China challenges, and finding solutions, and then creating lessons that we can then share with the rest of the Know the Game, Win the Game community. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you soon.